I love Nintendo, and generally speaking, I think they behave fairly honourably. They're not a perfect company by any means, and there have been certain negative stories over the years that have come out, but when you look around the video game industry and listen to some of the terrible working conditions and shoddy exploitative practices that are around, Nintendo can point to clear examples of where they've been a force for good in trying to fix things. Similarly, the vast majority of Nintendo games have simple to understand DLC packages with a clear cap, not open-ended microtransactions to haunt the nightmares of completionists. But there's one area where Nintendo really deserve to hang their heads in shame. This is a story of how Nintendo tried to be honourable and failed, went bad but won big, and now have a chance, a tiny chance but a chance, at redemption. I'm not talking about anything to do with their consoles. I'm not talking about the film or theme park or the Nintendo stores. No, I'm talking about the sad and terrible case of Nintendo's mobile output. Let me declare an interest right up front. I am not a fan of mobile titles, and it's very rare that I play them. The only Nintendo mobile game I've spent money on is Super Mario Run. The only other games I've actually properly played are Pokemon Go and Pikmin Bloom. None of what I'm saying is a criticism of anyone who plays and enjoys Mario Kart Tour or Fire Emblem Awakening or Animal Crossing Pocket Camp or anything else, but Nintendo's mobile journey has been full of twists and turns, and this video will cast a critical eye on the past before analysing some big changes ahead for Nintendo's mobile future. Let's get into it by reminding ourselves where it all began. It began in 2011 with then President Satoru Iwata telling Nikkei of Nintendo making mobile games, "This is absolutely not under consideration. If we did this, Nintendo would cease to be Nintendo." Well, life does a cruel trade in ironies, and less than 4 years later, hot of the debacle of the Wii U and the rocky start of the 3DS, Nintendo received a welcome boost to its share price from the news that they had partnered with Tokyo-based mobile gaming firm DeNA to bring Nintendo IP to the market. This was never a love connection. Of the first toe dip into mobile and Mario Kart TV app in 2014, Iwata was brutally blunt about the reasoning. The goal of our application on smartphones is not to generate profit, at least in the short term. The biggest point is to create consumer awareness and use that opportunity to have consumers know more about our information. But the numbers spoke for themselves. In 2012, mobile gaming was 10% of the global video games market. In 2016, it was 45%. They say beggars can't be choosers, and while Nintendo would never describe themselves as beggars, Iwata's statement to investors in the November 2014 says it all. "I believe that the era has ended when people play all kinds of games only on dedicated gaming systems." This was before the Switch renaissance, and who could blame Nintendo for clutching at what seemed like a potential salvation for the company? Nintendo had already had some mobile success at arm's length through the Pokemon Company. The Pokemon Company has always been and still is seemingly a lot more cavalier about entering the mobile space, and so it can hardly be a surprise that the absolute breakout Titanic mega hit of the decade came from that corner of the Nintendo skies. I'm talking, of course, about Pokemon Go. What's notable about Pokemon Go is that it's a perfect Nintendo product, taking an existing franchise and finding a new control system to make it feel fresh and fun for everyone. Pokemon Go deserved to be a hit. Not all of the profits, racking up at $6 billion and counting, went to Nintendo, and in fact Nintendo's share prices took a brief dive when investors realised that the game was developed by Niantic and that Nintendo only held a 32% share in the Pokemon Company. Still, even a relatively small share of $6 billion is enough to keep you warm on a cold night, and the nights at Nintendo in 2016 were definitely on the chilly side. The 3DS was aging, the Switch's future was uncertain, and mobile was one of Nintendo's few lifelines. Their first toe in the water was Super Mario Run. It has received a lot of criticism over the years, too simplistic, too boring, using the same old new Super Mario Bros. Style, so let me just put my cards on the table. I can't say enough good things about Super Mario Run. Again, it took Mario and tried to find the simplest expression of the character, mastering a single button mechanic while giving some complexity to the gameplay. It wasn't hugely brilliant or original, but it didn't need to be. It was a mobile game. But what made me love Mario Run, what made me buy Mario Run, was the fact they treated it like a game and sold it. There was a free version and a single one-off payment. $10 may seem steep, but since the game is about a sixth of the console game in terms of content, I feel a sixth of the price is fairly reasonable. But what this meant was no ads and microtransactions and loot boxes and any of the predatory techniques that have come to define mobile gaming could impinge upon Nintendo's mascot. They played fair, they did it the right way, and they got absolutely hammered for it. As they were review bombed with 1-star reviews, children who were used to their phone games being free experiences couldn't believe that any company would have the temerity to actually charge for a game, and at such an exorbitant price. Nintendo looked like the granddad in the corner, trying to turn back the clock to the old days, unaware that the world had moved on. And so, they moved on. Boy did they. Nintendo's list of apps reads like a crash course in their top franchises: Animal Crossing, Fire Emblem, Mario Kart, Pikmin, Miitomo, and Dr. Mario. There was one original venture, the intriguing Dragalia Lost, but what these apps had in common is that they saw the way the wind was blowing. They embraced the mobile market. After its first 3 years, Mario Kart Tour had passed 200 million downloads and raked in $300 million in profit. I can't find any specific statistics for how many people actually paid for the game, but TechJoy reports that 4.5% of women and 3.3% of men pay for mobile games. That would mean that the people who do play are probably averaging around a $30 spend on the game, but of course, not all spenders spend equally, and the whole mobile game system relies on a few so-called whales spending buku bucks. Yes, everyone has free choice on what they spend their money on, and I'm the last one to criticise anyone for what might seem to be odd personal spending choices, but my concern is that by endorsing this kind of approach, the mobile games industry is balancing its books chiefly on the backs of people with addictive personalities or who may otherwise be vulnerable. Especially when you have games filled with gacha mechanics which are tantamount to gambling, these games fall into an ethical grey area that Nintendo in other circumstances would not be seen dead in, the area of things that may be strictly legal but are not strictly ethical either. And even the legality may be changing, with many countries, particularly in Europe, pursuing regulation of loot boxes in games. Belgium has already gone down this route, although it has been tricky to enforce, but things are changing. The UK government's Education for a Connected World curriculum for online safety in schools refers specifically to loot boxes and the risk they pose. And while proposed action by the government didn't take off, 20 consumer groups in 18 European countries backed a report on the impact of loot boxes. Now, there's a long way to go before any changes are enacted across a broader swathe of territories, and still longer before the games industry responds, but if the chickens aren't yet coming home to roost, they're certainly in a nearby service station filling up the tank, and at that point Nintendo risks being tarred with the same brush as many other companies, some of whom have much more exploitative practices. In the Norwegian report, efforts from Nintendo, Microsoft and Sony to force game publishers to disclose drop rates on their loot boxes were branded lackluster. And although the report used FIFA and Raid Shadow Legends as case studies, Nintendo remains vulnerable just because they are such an iconic video game company. When the newspaper reports are published, there's a very decent chance that it will be Mario's picture alongside the announcements. So what is Nintendo's mobile future? They have pulled back considerably in recent years, and even Mario Kart Tour is now showing its age, and its content has been cannibalized to extend the life of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and promote the online service. Shigeru Miyamoto commented earlier this year that mobile will not be the primary path for Mario games, a statement so open-ended you can read into it more or less what you like, but it does suggest no new Mario mobile titles in the medium term at least. You can bet that the next Mario Kart will be a console edition, and while Pokemon will continue to plough its own field, reports circulated back in 2020 that the returns from mobile were disappointing to Nintendo and they were pulling back. It's possible to imagine another Fire Emblem game after the outsized success of Fire Emblem Heroes, which may indeed have helped bolster the profile of Fire Emblem Three Houses, and of course Pikmin Bloom is a fun app that also serves as a backdoor promotion for a niche series. My hunch is that Nintendo will slowly back away from the models they have used so far, but that's not to say they'll back away from the mobile gaming space entirely. In 2023, they announced a new partnership with DeNA, forming the new company, Nintendo Systems Company Limited. But what's striking is that this was not about the development of games. Instead, they announced the joint venture company will research and develop, as well as create value-added services to further reinforce Nintendo's relationships with consumers. This is, to me, quite a big twist. Instead of mobile offering a competing gaming space, what Nintendo seems to be doing, what frankly I hope they're doing, is leveraging mobile as a complementary experience to their games. Multiple patents have been issued focusing on integrating their console technology more tightly with their mobile phones, and even what seems to be an AR Nintendogs. Everybody want to Switch using their mobile phones as part of the gaming experience. Phones are now ubiquitous and Nintendo can't ignore them, and in many ways wouldn't want to. Why not do what they did with Pokemon Go and target those specific advantages cell phones can have? For example, why build a new system with a camera and voice control that will cost a lot to buy and won't be used in 80% of titles if most people have a tablet or phone that can be integrated with a Switch and used for this purpose? Or what if you could play demos of Switch games on your phone as an entry point for consumers? What if the next Animal Crossing mobile game has a mini version of your console town, meaning that mobile players aren't softly funneled towards in-game purchases, but rather towards Nintendo's core titles? Even if DNA just tightened Nintendo's suite of apps, it would be, I've no doubt, a very welcome development. So in terms of a Nintendo forecast, I would say the chances of Nintendo releasing a new mobile title before the end of 2024 is no more than 50%. I don't think they're done with mobile games, but I think they will exert a huge degree of caution and chiefly use mobile as an advertising tool in the same way that a significant reason for developing Pikmin Bloom was to raise the profile of the Pikmin franchise. The same reasons for entering the mobile space that Satoru Iwata outlined all the way back in 2014 still apply. They give new ways to open Nintendo intellectual properties to different audiences and give a second financial string to Nintendo's bow in the event of them running into difficulties. And if the next console stumbles at launch, I imagine they will return to the mobile fold quite quickly. But I hope they stick the landing this time and find a good, healthy relationship with mobile games that might not turn around to bite them a few years later. They've approached it with integrity and they've approached it cynically, but perhaps soon they'll finally get the balance right. Thank you for watching Nintendo Forecast. Take care and see you soon.